Hey y'all, I'm Katie, and this is Lacey, and together we are Budget Bitch. Good girl. Hey y'all, welcome back to this week on Budget Bitch. Today I'm going to be sharing the 3 things that I did in my budget and financial life to greatly increase how quickly I paid down my debt. But first, let's do a check-in on this week's expenses. Here is a list of this week's expenses. I did pretty well. I ate out a lot actually, but luckily none of it was crazy expensive. You can see I put each event in, every time we ate out, every time I had a miscellaneous charge, things like that. Pretty self-explanatory. Now let's check in on my weekly goals. So my Starbucks weekly goal is $17. My Starbucks app goes up by $25 at a time, so $17 is not actually possible, but I did spend $25 at Starbucks. And then restaurants, $63 was my goal, and I was a little under at $57.52, and miscellaneous, I am very much under at $26.29 rather than the $56 that I anticipated. So that's all in really great shape. I feel good about this method. This is the first week of this new method of just tracking these 3 expense areas at a time in my budget planner, and I think it's really helpful. I really like it. And then checking on my sinking funds, I contributed $500 to my car registration. I'll have some updates about that in the next week or 2, because I think we're going to delay car registration by a week or 2 and end up doing it in February. So there's my weekly check-in. Let's check in on one more item, my car payoff that I've been working on. I contributed $600, which was my stimulus payment. I put that straight towards debt payoff, and then I had another paycheck from one of my auxiliary income sources come in, and so that went straight to that. And that went straight to that. So, trucking along. 1 week in, paid off little more than $700 towards my car, on top of its normal payments. Okay. So today I wanted to share the 3 things that I did that really ramped up my debt repayment. Now, I had over $40,000 of credit card debt, which I was working to pay off. And I tried that first by just lowering little expenses here and there, trying to make a little extra money, things like that. But it was so much debt that I just felt like I was chipping away at it, right? Like I wasn't able to really see the progress, which was frustrating. So I made a few big changes that made huge impacts on that debt repayment. Here they are. Number 1, I lowered my rent. I used to live in a really lovely studio apartment, not very fancy, but an apartment in Washington, D.C., and my rent plus pet rent was a little over $1,600. That is not expensive for D.C. If you know the area, you know that that's actually kind of okay. If I lived closer to the metro, it would have been more expensive. If I had had more amenities in my apartment or a newer building, it would have been even more expensive. So $1,600 is a big chunk of change. And this is true for most people, that their mortgage or their rent payment is a big part of their bills. I ended up moving into a shared house where my rent, including pet rent, was $820. So I cut it almost in half. That was enormous. I mean, $800 savings every month. Hello, that's big money. I put that money all towards debt repayment. I didn't change the way that I lived at all. I didn't increase my budget in any other area. I just put that money towards debt repayment. This was huge because it meant with a minimum payment plus the $800 plus the few $100s I was already spending towards debt repayment, I could pay over $1,000 every month, which meant that $15,000 turned into $14,000 like that, instead of $15,000 turning into $14,970, turning into $14,900. It was amazing. There were multiple months where I could pay a couple $1,000s towards my debt repayment, and that was huge. The second thing that I did is I opened a secondary checking account at a different bank. Now, I didn't really do this on purpose. I did it because my credit card has a bank attached to it, Chase, and they offered me $300 if I opened a checking account and I set up direct deposit. But what I ended up doing is I took my large part-time job where I get paid every 2 weeks via direct deposit. I put that into that checking account. Now, in my mind, that money had always been dedicated to debt repayment. Well, not always, but in the past several months before this moment in time, it had been. But it all went into my main checking account. And that meant it gave me the chance to spend it on something else. It gave me this little bit of flexibility of, well, maybe I won't put all of it towards debt repayment. By putting it in a separate account, not only did I get the $300 bonus, which I put towards debt repayment, but I always knew that money was separate from my normal budget. That money is for debt repayment and debt repayment only. And that has been true through my entire credit card repayment process. I never spent that money on anything else. I always spent it only on debt snowball. That was huge. Having it separated, having it physically separated from my other money. This is my expenses money. This is my debt repayment money. Was really helpful. As soon as it would come in, every other Friday, I would see it show up in my account and it would immediately get transferred out. It also meant that I could ride really close to the line because I didn't spend money out of that account. So I didn't have to worry like, oh, did I forget about some automatic charge it's going to go through? No, nothing happens at that account except one direct deposit and me paying my debts off. Highly recommend if you have multiple sources of income and you can earmark certain sets of income for debt repayment or savings, just put it in a different account. The fact that it was at a different account at a different bank added an extra layer of protection against me just like sliding that back over into my spending account. Third thing is anytime I got a pay increase or a bonus of any kind, that money went straight towards debt repayment. So I occasionally will do gigs. I'll occasionally get income from, my teaching job that I started recently. And that money, as soon as it hits my account, I immediately transfer it to a credit card. Well, not anymore because I don't have credit card debt anymore, which feels great. But now I put it directly towards my car payment. This is really helpful to do in advance if it's something that you know about, like a pay increase. If you know that you're going to get a bonus in December, or you know that you're going to get a pay increase at January for cost of living, then to anticipate that and go ahead and estimate that into your debt repayment so that you've decided where that money is going. Otherwise, maybe you get to that first paycheck with the pay increase and you're like, ooh, that's an extra $100. Maybe I'll treat myself. Well, treat yourself to a debt-free life and put it towards debt repayment. It feels so good. Now, it wouldn't be a Budget Bitch video if I didn't tell you one mistake that I made in this process. I've talked about it in earlier videos, and that is understanding when I need to pay something and how much is coming out of each paycheck. For my military job, I get paid twice a month. And let's take, for example, my rent. Back when I paid $1,600 in rent, I was always a little over budget. Then when I moved to a shared house and I was paying $800 in rent, $820 in rent, I automatically put that $800 towards my credit card. But the problem is I couldn't really afford that $1,600 in the beginning of the month. And I was still trying to pay $1,600, albeit $800 of it going towards debt repayment the first of the month. And after a couple months of getting to the end of the month and being like, why is this not working? I finally did the math in chronological order and discovered that that $800 savings I should take out of my second paycheck rather than my first paycheck because my first paycheck had more mandatory bills coming out of it. So I would say, yes, make sure that you are automatically taking any of those savings and putting it into a savings account, putting it into a retirement, or paying off debt, wherever you're putting that extra money. But You are not beholden to doing it on the same day of the month as you are doing the original expense. That hugely changed my spending once I realized I needed to split up some of those expenses so that they were coming out of different paychecks. Lacey, did you want to add anything? You're very cute.
And now some words of wisdom from Lacey. Moving to a less desirable home or making some other large financial decision that doesn't meet with your dream life expectations can be hard. But keep in mind that it is a temporary tactic to getting to the ultimate goal. It's not for everyone, but if you're thinking about making a big shift like changing apartments or selling your car, do the math and see how much faster it will get you to your goal. You might decide it's worth it.